I welcome this opportunity to thank all of you in the communications industry for your continuing voluntary contributions to the emergency broadcast system. In a national emergency, it is essential that the President's able to speak with the American people on very short notice. Working together under the EBS, the broadcast networks and stations, cable and telephone industries, and wire services provide this critical capability. I'm proud of the successful cooperation between government and industry that you have developed with the EBS. It's an outstanding example of just how effective government and industry working together can be, cooperating in this case to create and sustain the emergency broadcast system. So let me thank the American communications industry for voluntarily providing this important service. You are truly a vital national asset. You have the thanks of all Americans and this President for your generous public service. Keep up the good work. Thank you, and God bless you all.
As a former broadcaster, I know the value of the emergency broadcasting system. It saves lives, property, and it is a vital component of our national security. At the state and local level, the EBS system has been activated well over 10,000 times since its inception in 1976. That's evidence of public service by our nation's broadcasters. If you are a new employee, or for that matter, if you need refreshed on the EBS system, I hope you will take time to watch this video. It could mean the difference in getting vital emergency information to the public and your fellow broadcasters. It not only explains the overall operation of the emergency broadcast system, it also will help show you what to do when faced with an EBS activation request. I want to personally thank the broadcasters in the great state of North Carolina who provided this first-class video. I want to especially thank Bob Butler, the state EBS chairman, and Charles Stiegel, the state co-chairman, and all those employees at WPTF AM and WPTF TV and WQDR FM for putting this special program together. And I want to thank Clyde Penny of the state of North Carolina Division of Emergency Services. I also want to thank the National Association of Broadcasters for providing distribution. Their support of the EBS over the years has been vital. People like Eddie Fritz, Jeff Bauman, and Belva Brissett help make the system work. As a station manager, engineer, DJ, or whatever your position, your support of the emergency broadcast system is an excellent way to demonstrate commitment to the community you serve. Thank you very much for that support.
The federal government and private industry are equally dedicated to developing an emergency information system that can serve all of the people of the nation. Here to comment on the role of private industry is Eddie Fritz, president of the National Association of Broadcasters.
I want to thank you and station management for your dedication and spirit of cooperation that you have displayed to ensure that your communities and the nation will have a reliable public communication system in time of emergency. It's been my experience that in an emergency situation, broadcasters will rise to the occasion to provide critical information to the public. The emergency broadcasting system is one method for broadcasters to provide such service on an organized basis at the federal, state, or local levels. I'm proud to represent broadcasters on this occasion, and I thank you for the privilege.
We interrupt this program for an emergency action notification. Important information will follow this tone.
Emergency action notification concerning a tornado warning for the counties of...
Action notification concerning a toxic spill on Highway 515 north of the town.
This is an emergency action notification concerning a hurricane warning for the following coastal counties. This program for an emergency action notification concerning a flash flood warning for residents in an area bordered by...
action notification concerning an incident at Stevens Nuclear Plant.
Bob Butler, chairman, North Carolina State Emergency Communications Committee.
When natural or man-made disaster threatens life or property, the people of the country, a state, a county, or a city need real-time warning and instructions to provide the utmost possible safety and protection. With this in mind, 3 federal government agencies and broadcasters put together the Emergency Broadcast System concept. The originators were the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the Department of Commerce Weather Bureau, and the broadcaster's National Industry Advisory Committee. This videotape has been developed as a nationwide training program to help station operators and personnel comply with the EBS rules and regulations. We will go over what you should do as a station operator to correctly respond to a request to activate the EBS at the national, state, and local levels, what EBS materials should be posted at the station control point, and what your role and responsibilities are with respect to various EBS rules and regulations. This is Brian McIntyre, General Manager of Durham Life Broadcasting's WPTF AM. I've asked Brian to take you to our operational area where he will be able to demonstrate the various procedures involved in executing the emergency broadcast system programming. Brian?
Thank you, Bob. Now join me in the Radio Engineering Master Control Room. This is the Radio Engineering Master Control Room for WPTF AM and our sister station WQDR FM. WQDR is the Common Program Control Station, or CPCS1, for the Raleigh operational area. And this is Chuck Britt, Director of Engineering for Durham Life Broadcasting. Chuck, what happens in here?
This room ties the outside world of satellites and telephone lines, radio monitors, and the like to our distribution system, routing this material to the various studios throughout the building, and prominent in this rack is our EBS equipment, receiver, encoder, and decoder. This equipment is operated by remote control from the main control rooms of WPTF and WQDR. Let's go across the hall and see how all of this works. This is the main control room for WQDR, and this is Laurel Smith, General Manager of WQDR and Chairperson of the Raleigh Operational Area, which is composed of 11 counties. As Brian mentioned earlier, WQDR is the CPCS1 for this area.
First, I need to show you the written material we use in producing an EBS. We have the EBS checklist with the current authenticator list on the inside cover. Then the state plan, since we are responsible for producing state-level broadcast, and the Raleigh operational plan. All of this is kept at easy reach in the main control room. The FCC rule says that a copy of the appropriate EBS checklist must be in the main control room, where it will be immediately available to broadcast station personnel. You see, these are the individuals responsible for authenticating emergency action notifications, terminations, the logging of EBS tests received, and initiating appropriate EBS actions.
Laurel, there are two different kinds of checklists, aren't there? One for participating stations and one for non-participating stations.
Correct. And the main difference between a participating and a non-participating EBS station is this. A non-participating station must go off the air in the event of a national-level EBS activation. They would go off the air in accordance with procedures explained in the non-participating EBS checklist. All other requirements are the same as for participating stations.
Like conducting weekly tests of the system.
And logging receipt of the weekly tests of the other stations being monitored. I might also point out that non-participating stations may elect to activate the EBS or rebroadcast EBS programming in the event of a state or local level EBS activation. Now, let's take a look at how we cover incoming EBS activations with the help of Jay Butler, Station Manager and Program Director of WQDR.
The highest priority for the EBS is presidential use, normally referred to as national level EBS. As indicated on page 1 of the EBS checklist, we would receive the EBS activation message from one of the following methods: AP or UPI teletype, by satellite from one of the networks we are affiliated with, keyed by the network's own alert system, or the EBS monitor receiver. If we were to receive the message by AP or UPI teletype or network satellite, we must compare the authenticator word in the notification with the word on the current authenticator list. We would take no action if the words did not match. If the words match, we must discontinue normal programming and broadcast the announcement on page 2 of the EBS checklist, followed by transmission of the EBS attention signal. Next, we read announcement number 5 for participating stations, also shown on page 2. If a station is designated as a state relay station, the following sentence has to be added. We will also be serving as a program distribution and relay channel to other stations. AP or UPI teletype, network satellite, or the EBS monitor receiver. Any of these three methods of receiving the EBS activation can serve as a source of presidential programming. And this is important. Broadcast the presidential programming as soon as it becomes available. If the presidential program is not ready at this point, fill the time with standby script number 7 on page 3. The last step in a national level EBS activation is to monitor the same sources we mentioned earlier for receipt of the termination message. AP or UPI and network affiliates will again compare the authenticator word in the authenticator list. If the words match, broadcast announcement number 3 on page 5 of the EBS checklist to conclude operation under the EBS. We may then resume normal programming.
If we are all lucky, we will never have to handle presidential programming or a national level EBS in our lifetime. But we are much more likely to be involved in state and local level EBS broadcast. If you have been in this profession for many months, you may already have done so. The EBS alert system is used for a variety of emergencies. Some of the more familiar ones, severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, hurricanes, flash floods, snowstorms, power outages, and toxic chemical spills. But less familiar ones indigenous to certain parts of the country include forest fires, tsunamis or tidal waves, earthquakes, and volcanoes.
A state-level EBS would cover either the entire state or a sizable portion involving several broadcast operational areas. Any state-level EBS request in North Carolina, for example, would originate in the Emergency Operations Center of Emergency Management. The message requesting the EBS activation would be handed by the Public Information Officer to a control room operator who would immediately contact the main control room of the CPCS-1. In North Carolina, WQDR is the CPCS-1 for the Raleigh operational area and the state originating primary relay. It is our responsibility to originate such programming to be relayed by 12 other CPCS-1s, as well as programming for stations in our own operational area. We would probably tape the information on our cassette recorder and then play the tape through our audio board for broadcasts. If this were to be an unusually long message, and addressed by the governor, for example, we would carry it live. Once we had coordinated the procedure with the State Emergency Management Office, we would interrupt our programming to broadcast the EBS attention signal. This would alert other CPCS-1s in the state to relay instructions and stand by to rebroadcast the special program. A local level EBS could involve anything from a toxic chemical spill or power failure involving one section of the city, all the way up to a severe weather situation involving as many as all 11 counties in our operational area. Let's demonstrate how one of these might go from the standpoint of both a CPCS-1 and a station receiving the message from us. It's 5 o'clock on a summer afternoon. A sheriff's department deputy spots a funnel cloud in the distance. It dips to the ground, then rises again and begins to move to the northeast. He immediately radios headquarters, and they promptly call the National Weather Service at the Raleigh-Durham Airport. After carefully checking the storm on the radar screen, a tornado warning for Wake County is written, and the public forecaster calls WQDR control. A special warning light flashes.
Control. This is Chase McCall at the Weather Service at RDU, and I have a request for an immediate activation of the EBS system.
Okay, let's first authenticate. How about the number 15?
15, that's Rocket.
That's correct. What do you have?
A tornado warning for Wake County.
All right, the tape is rolling. Give me a countdown, please.
Okay, here goes. In 3, 2, 1. This is a tornado warning for the residents of Wake County. At 5 p.m., a funnel cloud was sighted by a member of the Wake County Sheriff's Department just north of the town of Apex. The cloud has contacted the ground at least once, causing property damage, and it was last seen moving in a northeast direction with a forward motion of approximately 15 to 25 miles per hour. This continued direction will take the tornado close to the northwestern quadrant of the city of Raleigh within the next 35 minutes. All persons in the path of this storm should take immediate cover. This tornado warning is in effect until 5:45 p.m. This has been a tornado warning for the residents of Wake County and is in effect until 5:45 p.m. Stay tuned to your local radio or television station or your NOAA weather radio. This concludes this broadcast from the National Weather Service at the Raleigh-Durham Airport.
Following the taping of the message, the announcer rewinds the tape, checks the contents, and prepares to activate the system by interrupting his own programming.
We are interrupting this program for a special broadcast from the Emergency Broadcast System. Special information will follow this tone.
Throughout North Carolina, EBS programming is being converted to what we refer to as a repeat tone system. This first tone from our CPCS-1 control room activates all EBS receivers in the operational area. Control room personnel and all of the stations in this area are now bringing up their EBS monitors to determine the reason for the attention signal.
We are interrupting this program for a special emergency broadcast system message for all stations serving Wake County. This concerns a tornado warning, and it is for immediate broadcast.
This concerns announcement tells station personnel what they need to know in making a decision on whether they should carry the broadcast. If their broadcast signal serves listeners in Wake County, they know automatically to carry a tornado warning without delay.
Stand by, please.
Those words, stand by, please, represent the cue for those stations needing to carry the broadcast to put the WQDR signal on their air. There will be a 5-second pause for them to put the emergency programming on their air. From this point on, the CPCS-1 does everything for those stations rebroadcasting it: the interrupt announcement, the EBS tone, and the emergency message.
We interrupt this program for a special broadcast from the Emergency Broadcast System. Special information will follow this tone. We have interrupted this program because of a weather emergency involving a tornado in Wake County. We switch now to the National Weather Service Forecast Office at the Raleigh-Durham Airport.
This is a tornado warning for the residents of Wake County. At 5 p.m., a funnel cloud was sighted by a member of the Wake County Sheriff's Department just north of the town.
Following the completion of the message, the CPCS-1 announcer signs off the broadcast.
This concludes this broadcast from the National Weather Service at the Raleigh-Durham Airport.
Stay tuned for more information. This concludes this broadcast from the Raleigh operational area of the Emergency Broadcast System.
He pauses 5 seconds for stations to get out, then resumes regular programming. This is how a local level EBS is originated from the control room of WQDR, a CPCS-1 facility. Now let's go down the hall just a few steps to Studio A of our sister station, WPTF, to see how a station receiving such programming will handle the broadcast.
What we're about to demonstrate here are those procedures which would be carried out by the majority of the radio stations in the nation. Relay stations that are rebroadcasting EBS programming generated by the CPCS-1 station they are assigned to monitor. This is the main control room of WPTF in Raleigh.
It's free. Yeah, she steals like a thief, but she's always a woman to me.
The announcer's world is interrupted by a strobe light that comes on when the EBS decoder is unmuted. She listens for the interrupt message to see if this is a weekly test or if it's an emergency action notification.
We are interrupting this program for a special emergency broadcast system message for all stations serving Wake County. This concerns a tornado warning, and it is for immediate broadcast. Stand by, please.
At this point, there is no doubt in the announcer's mind this is a must carry. She fades out whatever programming is on the air and brings the CPCS-1 programming up on the control board during the 5-second window. And now the program, the EBS tone, and the emergency message are all provided for her by the CPCS-1.
We interrupt this program for a special broadcast from the Emergency Broadcast System. Special information will follow this tone.
The announcer notes the content of the broadcast so she can repeat the essentials for listeners tuning in late. In fact, we have a rule at WPTF that following emergency broadcasts of this magnitude, our announcers must repeat the heart of the message at least every 5 minutes as long as the warning is in effect.
Weather Radio. This concludes this broadcast from the National Weather Service at the Raleigh-Durham Airport.
Stay tuned for more information. This concludes this broadcast from the Raleigh operational area of the Emergency Broadcast System.
And of course, we will keep you informed on the progress and aftermath of this tornado right here on WPTF AM Stereo 680. In fact, we have a WPTF news crew on the way to what is reported to be a touchdown of that tornado just north of Apex. Let me repeat for those of you just tuning in, there's a tornado warning in effect.
Now we have one more demonstration for you from the radio side, and that is our weekly EBS test in accordance with the EBS checklist and Section 73.961C of the rules. As most of you know, this section requires all AM, FM, and TV stations to conduct weekly transmission tests of the attention signal, plus the test script, a minimum of 1 time per week on random days and at random times between the hours of 8:30 a.m. local time and local sunset. If we were a non-commercial educational FM station operating at 10 watts or less, or if we were a low-power TV station, we would not need to transmit the 2-tone EBS attention signal prior to making the test announcement. And now, that weekly test.
And that's the latest from WPTF News. Late-breaking news as it happens. Next scheduled news at the top of the hour. I'm John Wesley Brett.
This is a test of the emergency broadcast system. Important information will follow this tone. This is a test of the emergency broadcast system. The broadcasters of your area, in voluntary cooperation with federal, state, and local authorities, have developed this system to keep you informed in the event of an emergency. If this had been an actual emergency, the attention signal you just heard would have been followed by official information, news, or instruction. This station serves the Raleigh operational area. This concludes this test of the emergency broadcast system.
We could have altered that test announcement slightly if we wanted to make a reference to the special type of emergency likely to occur in this particular area. EBS rules were amended recently to permit this as a result of a request from the Southern California Broadcasters Association. There, they are concerned with earthquake preparedness. By the way, you can eliminate the weekly test announcement if, in that same week, your station is participating in a coordinated state or local test. FCC rules permit stations to substitute that test or a real activation for the weekly test. As you can see, we logged this test in our transmitter logbook. We logged it by date and time. And when we receive a test from WQDR, the CPCS1 that we monitor, we also log the date and time for that test. And I guess it goes without saying, we always log any actual emergency programming that we carry through the EBS system. This concludes the radio portion of this training tape. But stay in focus. Chuck Britt is now standing by 1 floor below in the master control room for WPTF TV, Channel 28.
We want to take our final moments here to demonstrate what happens at a TV station when an EBS activation request is received. And I've asked Mario Dell to assist us here.
The television side of EBS was developed in response to a White House statement of requirements, the latest of which was signed by President Reagan in May of 1982. It calls for activation of the audio in 6 to 10 minutes and video within 3 hours. The video response time is the time allowed to get the president to a television transmission facility and not the time allowed for TV stations to respond. As is the case with AM and FM radio stations, TV stations must respond immediately to a presidential request for activation of EBS. TV stations must also display a video slide or visual electronic crawl, which provides emergency information for the hearing impaired at the time of the EBS activation. Our primary source for a national level EBS would be our National Network Station Alert System. The CPCS-1 would be the backup. The warning light and the unmuting of the EBS receiver audio is our first word that the CPCS-1 in our area is relaying a request for an emergency action notification. Just as in a relay radio station, our control operator immediately monitors the receiver audio to determine the nature of the request. Even before the concerns announcement is given, preparation begins. Our operator types a command into the character generator to bring up the EBS graphic dealing with a weather-related emergency, since over 90% of our EBS requests are related to the subject of weather. If indeed this particular request deals with weather, we select the graphic on preview and prepare to couple the CPCS-1 audio with the EBS weather graphic during the 5-second join window in the concerns announcement. If the announcement is not related to weather, we bring up a generic EBS graphic.
Exposed to the ash in the cell. The hot gases that are released as part of the burning process.
Following the completion of the emergency announcement, we prepare a character-generated crawl for several passes across the bottom of the screen. In accordance with a standard set by television station operators in North Carolina, each such passage is preceded by 3 1-second bursts of EBS tone. The standard for such crawls in North Carolina is a white Helvetica font with a 22-point minimum, running in a red band across the bottom third of the screen. Flashing or coloring of the word warning or watch is an option. Another option is to add station call letters or logo somewhere in the picture. Also in North Carolina, stations are encouraged to add a message similar to, "If you have a neighbor who is handicapped and may need assistance, please relate this message to them." Stationary messages with warnings can be inserted in the lower or upper corner of the screen. A small font, Helvetica of 10 to 15 points, is recommended in the uppercase only. Weekly tests of the EBS system are self-contained on video cart, announcement and video, except for the actual alert tone, which we generate live during the 22.5-second audio blank space on the cart.
And that's how we handle an EBS request or test here at Channel 28.
I strongly recommend that all state and local plans be thoroughly tested on a regular basis with your public officials and Weather Bureau representatives. This is the only way you can be sure the system will work when you need it the most. In the case of a request to activate the EBS at state or local levels, activation by a station is strictly at the discretion of station management. If you think the emergency does not affect your audience, you do not have to activate the EBS. On the other hand, stations have the authority to activate the EBS themselves if they feel it is appropriate, even though they might not have received a request from any public official or notice from the station they are monitoring. It's been my pleasure to assist in making this training program. I hope that we provided you with some of the more important elements necessary to successfully activate the EBS at any level should the need arise at your station. Thank you very much for your time.
We interrupt this program for an emergency action notification. Important information will follow this tone.
Emergency action notification concerning a tornado warning for the counties of...
Action notification concerning a toxic spill on Highway 515 north of the town.
This is an emergency action notification concerning a hurricane warning for the following coastal counties. This program for an emergency action notification concerning a flash flood warning for residents in an area bordered by...
Emergency action notification concerning an incident at Stevens Nuclear Plant.